Thank you. The next item of business is portfolio questions on health and sport. Question 1, Neil Findlay, please.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on when Dr Veronicas will come to Scotland to carry out full mesh removal procedures.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
This week, the Chief Medical Officer wrote to Dr Veronicas to reiterate her invitation for him to come to Scotland for an observational visit. In their discussions up to now, they have been looking at a provisional date of April or May. She was also able to advise him of the offer of a contract of employment, subject to the detailed deliberations and agreement on processes and working within the NHS Scotland environment that had previously been discussed with him and are standard for any visiting clinician. We hope Dr Veronicas will be able, clearly subject to his availability, to accept this offer. And today the Chief Medical Officer has again written to Dr Veronicas to get his response to the letter that she'd sent earlier with that offer of a contract of employment.
Neil Findlay, please.
Things are moving ahead very, very slowly, Cabinet Secretary, but I'm pleased to hear that there is some progress at last. But in the meantime, women here are being told that they are having full mesh removal procedures. These are being recorded on their medical records, only for them then to go and be operated on by Dr Veronicas in the US and find that 10, 15, 20 or more centimetres of mesh is being removed from them. This week, I got a response from the First Minister following the meeting we had in November that said that women had to, if they had these concerns, should report these cases to the regulators if they had concerns. These women have gone through enough. They don't need added stress of taking individual cases to the GMC. So I'm asking whether you, the Cabinet Secretary, or indeed the First Minister, will now call in the General Medical Council to look at what appears to be the systematic misleading of patients recorded on patients' notes here in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
So 2 points. First of all, just on the point about matters moving slowly, I completely understand what Mr Findlay is saying there and share that frustration, but there are proper processes to go through in terms of making sure, as Dr Veronicas has acknowledged, that he understands the environment in Scotland in which he would be operating in, and he has accepted indeed that it is the right professional approach to come for that observational visit, so we understand too what he needs by way of instruments and so on before he can come and operate. The contract of employment is a clear indication that that is what we want, where we want to be. On your point about cases, you have raised this before, and what we committed to doing was an independent clinician-led case note review. That is underway. Professor Alison Britton has agreed to act as moderator for the review. It will involve the women individually with those independent clinicians who are sourced by the Royal College of Gynaecologists, looking at each of their individual cases and discussing that through with them. That is the right next step before we see what evidence exists that could, if it's necessary, be referred to regulators. But we need to do that, and we need to do that in a way that involves, as it has done, the Royal College, Professor Britton and the Health and Social Care Alliance in terms of ensuring that there are patient views fed into this, and that work is well underway. The actual specific reviews will begin in April, and the individual women, all the women whose information we hold from the meetings that the First Minister and I had with them, plus any others who have written to me and any others who then want to come forward. But on the ones that we have at the moment, they will all be written to and told exactly what will happen about their individual cases, how to be involved in that, and that we will take the lead in ensuring that those individual cases are looked at. If there is further action as a consequence of that, because it's a very serious situation, then Mr Findlay should be assured that I will take that further action.
Thank you. Quite rightly, that was a very long and detailed answer, but I must ask for shorter supplementaries here and shorter answers, because that was a very full answer. Miles Briggs, followed by Ruth
Thank
Maguire.
you, Deputy Presiding Officer. In the letter to me of the 24th of February, the Cabinet Secretary says that there's currently work ongoing drawing up the organisation's set-up criteria and validity for the new £1 million fund being made available. Can I ask, will women affected be involved in this, and what discussions have taken place to date?
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
The answer to that is yes. We are again working with the Health and Social Care Alliance. We have a lot of information already from the women who've been in touch, that we've met and so on, about the specific financial issues that have affected them. But we will continue to involve them, and I hope very shortly to announce the exact details of that fund, what the criteria are, how to apply, and so on.
Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituent Julia is a full-time carer for her husband and has serious mobility issues. She's anxious and worried about her capacity to make the journey through to Edinburgh and the impact on that on her recovery. Would the Cabinet Secretary explore the issue of travel, recovery and rehabilitation for women from the west of Scotland travelling to Edinburgh with me, perhaps at a later date?
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary.
I'm very happy to look in more detail. First of all, to give Ms Maguire the existing arrangements and how they may assist, but also to look in more detail both at the use of the fund, but also whether or not there are aspects of that care that can be delivered more locally.
Question 2, Claire Adams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to improve outcomes for people with inflammatory bowel disease.
Minister Claire Haughey.
The Scottish Government, through its Modernising Patient Pathways programme, has been working closely with health boards and Crohn's and Colitis UK in recent years to improve IBD services, pathways and patient outcomes across Scotland. This includes the development of a series of self-management tools, care plans, mobile app and supporting the pilot of new specialist IBD community nurse models. In addition, we are currently trialling Flare cards in NHS Lothian. These provide people with quick and easy advice on immediate steps that they can take to help manage unpredictable and fluctuating symptoms and have been co-developed with Crohn's and Colitis UK. They will shortly be extended to a further 2 health board areas, NHS Grampian and Borders, with the intention to roll out the use of Flare cards across the rest of Scotland, subject to further evaluation.
Claire Adams.
Can I thank the Minister for her reply and for the information regarding the Flare cards. In discussion with the cross-party group on IBD, it's my understanding that different health boards have different pathways for diagnosis and treatment of people, some using primary care, some using secondary care options. In this context, can I ask the Minister what the Government is doing to ensure that there are clear pathways and protocols available for IBD sufferers across Scotland and that those pathways are in line with best practice?
Claire Adams. Answering your own question. Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Firstly, can I pay tribute to the work of the IBD cross-party group and also to the interest that Claire Adamson has shown over some years in this area. The Modernising Patient Pathways programme is leading on a series of national workshops with the gastroenterology community across Scotland with a view to producing evidence-based standardised pathways for people who present with lower GI symptoms, including those with an IBD diagnosis.
Mary Fee.
Children and young people with inflammatory bowel disease are often misdiagnosed, resulting in multiple hospital admissions and absences from school. And early diagnosis is a significant factor given the huge rise in paediatric inflammatory bowel disease, mainly driven by Crohn's disease. What steps will the Scottish Government and the NHS take to improve diagnosis for children and young people with inflammatory bowel disease?
Minister.
I thank Mary Fee for that answer. I think it's a really important issue that she's raised. The Scottish Government has been investing in research by Cure Crohn's and Colitis in Childhood Research Project that's led by Professor Charlie Lees, who's a consultant gastroenterologist based at the Western General Hospital. The project will help to determine what causes disease flare-ups in some patients and has the potential to lead to the development of personalised therapy in colitis. And that project that I refer to there is the PREDICT study. So there is investment going on across Scotland and research, and I think it's a really important issue.
Question 3, Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what investment is making in the Scottish Ambulance Service ahead of the West of Scotland trauma network being launched.
Cabinet Secretary.
By the end of 2019-20, we will have invested £33.4 million in the Scottish Trauma Network, which includes the Scottish Ambulance Service, with funding planned to increase to 41.6 annually by 2023-24. From this investment to date, the SAS Trauma Desk based at the Glasgow Ambulance Control Centre is operational 24/7, playing a vital role in the coordination of services in response to trauma, with additional investment in major trauma equipment across the service's emergency vehicle fleet.
Stuart McMillan.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. And at a recent Community Council meeting in my constituency, where senior staff from Inverclyde Royal Hospital spoke about the West of Scotland Trauma Network, there were concerns raised by constituents about the impact on local ambulance provision. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide assurances to my constituents that the Scottish Ambulance Service will be able to meet the needs of the local community when the trauma network is launched, and it will not result in slow response times in Inverclyde, particularly when ambulances do have to take people up to Paisley and Glasgow?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Mr McMillan for that supplementary. I do understand that those concerns will arise in this instance. However, the ambulance service is really clear of our expectation that they give impact, consideration to the impact of any changes where additional demands are placed on their capacity. They're currently undertaking a national review of demand and capacity, which will include the anticipated demand on them from the West of Scotland Trauma Network, as they're using their experience from elsewhere in Scotland, where we have the trauma centres now in Aberdeen and in Dundee. That review of demand and capacity will help them ensure that they are able to meet all the demands, and they will bring from that their requirements of the health service in terms of additional resources and where those resources need to be deployed. So we are committed to supporting them in this work and to considering very seriously the outcome of their national review of demand and capacity, taking account of all the factors we've outlined.
Question 4, Murdo Fraser.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what the average waiting times are for a urology appointment at NHS Tayside.
Cabinet Secretary.
So the average wait for a new outpatient urology appointment for Tayside was 32 days during the quarter that ended December 2019. More than £9.6 million has been made available to NHS Tayside in the current financial year to reduce waiting times across all specialties. In autumn of last year, NHS Tayside opened a treatment centre specifically focused on reducing urology waiting times. Their focus is to enhance patient pathways and experience while accessing urology outpatients.
Murdo Fraser.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response? However, given the figures she's quoted, I've been told by 2 separate constituents just in the last few weeks that they've each been told they have to wait 60 weeks to see a specialist urologist in NHS Tayside. And I'm sure she would agree that for people who have got what are sometimes painful and distressing conditions, that wait of a year and 2 months is totally unacceptable. And can't you do more to help NHS Tayside to address this problem?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I completely agree with Mr Fraser and his constituents that wait is too long. If in the specific cases that he's referencing, he would care to send me those details, then I will pick that up directly with NHS Tayside. There is a trajectory. All the boards have one. They all come from the Waiting Times Improvement Plan, and we have a weekly, indeed in some instances a daily focus with boards on how they are making the improvements against the investment that we have given them to improve their waiting times. So I would want to see exactly what that information is, and then have a detailed look with NHS Tayside and get back to Mr Fraser on that matter.
Question 5, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether obesity rates in school-aged children are reducing and what measures are being considered to make further progress.
Minister.
The percentage of children at risk of being overweight has been fairly constant over the last decade at around 22%, of which 10% are at the risk of obesity. However, there are increasing inequalities in child unhealthy weight between children living in the most and least deprived areas. This is why our ambition to halve childhood obesity by 2030 and significantly reduce health inequalities sits at the heart of our Diet and Healthy Weight Delivery Plan published in 2018. We are taking actions on many fronts. In coming months, we will publish a plan to make it easier for people to eat well out of home, and we will introduce legislation later this year to restrict the promotion of foods high in fat, sugar and salt. There's more to be done to strengthen support for children and families to eat well and to have a healthy weight in early years.
Willie Coffey.
I thank the Minister for that answer. According to Obesity Action Scotland, 16% of children aged 2 to 15, that's about 130,000, are at risk of obesity. And the problems, as the Minister says, seems to be widening between the most deprived and most well-off communities. Can the Minister give us some assurance that the Government's commitment to having child obesity by 2030 can get back on track? And what more can we, our families, our schools do to encourage healthy eating in the home and at school?
Minister.
I can certainly give that commitment to Willie Coffey, that the Scottish Government is committed to reducing the number of obese people in the whole of Scotland, but particularly in childhood. The Scottish Government is doing many things, but fundamentally this is an issue for Scotland. Everyone, including public bodies, industry and frontline practitioners, all have a part to play to improve Scotland's diet and support children to eat well. And we welcome the commitment of local partners in North Ayrshire and the East Region and a number of other localities to work across the system to lead innovative action in their local communities. And this includes exploring opportunities through a wide range of levers, such as planning and licensing, to tackle childhood obesity.
Question 6, Ruth Maguire.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the use of punitive sanction regimes in drug and alcohol treatment services.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government does not advocate the use of punitive sanctions in drug and alcohol treatment and recovery services. In common with the rest of our NHS, a person-centred approach to treatment and recovery is a key focus of our Rights, Respect and Recovery strategy, which is highlighted as part of our 8-point treatment plan.
Ruth Maguire.
Presiding Officer, the Cabinet Secretary will share my concern that punitive sanction regimes do happen in drug and alcohol treatment services. Can I ask what the Scottish Government will do to ensure that this ends and that all treatment services meet people where they are and offers them the best chance for recovery and support?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Ms Maguire for that supplementary. As I think members across this chamber understand, in addition to the significant additional investment that the First Minister indicated at FMQs and that my colleague Ms Forbes will make clear in the budget debate to come, all of that investment should be focused in ensuring that all our services, including mental health, as well as other services, in a sense, wrap around the individuals rather than forcing the individuals to fit into the nature of processes and services and how services want to run themselves. That is a clear signal that came to us, a very clear recommendation from the Dundee Commission on drugs, and one that we are actively taking forward in terms of our plans for the coming financial year on how that significant additional investment, in addition to the £50-odd million that sits with our health boards for this work, will be proactively used to ensure that we're listening, as Mr Fitzpatrick is doing yesterday, to the voices of those with real personal experience and to service providers and users to make sure that the drug and alcohol treatment services are targeted at what the individuals need and reach out beyond health into areas of housing and other matters that are the responsibility of our local authority colleagues. So we put the services around the individual and genuinely help them to move on with their lives.
And last question, I'll have to be brief for all counts. Question 7, Anna Sarwar, please.
To ask the Scottish Government when it last met NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and what was discussed.
Cabinet Secretary.
So ministers and Scottish Governments regularly meet with representatives from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. As Mr Sarwar will know, we have 2 oversight boards running on that health board. I last met the chair of the health board on the 7th of February. The second performance oversight group, which has been established and is chaired by our Chief Performance Officer for NHS Scotland, met on the 7th of February and their second meeting is later today.
Anna Sarwar,
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. The Cabinet Secretary knows my view on the leadership of the Health Board, but I want to raise the matter of out-of-hours service, which came up at FMQs today. This isn't just about temporary closures, this is now a systemic problem around GP shortages. In 2017, there were 54 closures across the Health Board. In 2018, there was 258 closures across the Health Board. And in 2019, there were 816 closures across the Health Board due to GP shortages. What urgent action will the Cabinet Secretary take to make sure we have a continuity of care for the people across Greater Glasgow and Clyde.
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm grateful to Mr Sarwar for that question, and I need to correct you in as much as the problem in out-of-hours services in Greater Glasgow and Clyde is not about GP shortages. GPs are willing to be involved in out-of-hours services. The problem is that Greater Glasgow and Clyde has not paid attention to Sir Lewis Ritchie's review, has not enacted the very clear recommendations that he made in that review, and that has, as a consequence, resulted in those instances that you have referred to. And that is part of the reason, one of the reasons, why I escalated the full board to level 4 in order that we can direct that and improve that service. What is clear to me from visiting those out-of-hours services and from Sir Lewis Ritchie's direct engagement with GPs and my conversations with them is that they are very willing to work in out-of-hours services. For many of them, they see that as a positive enhancement to their role. But what they need is a multidisciplinary team in those services, and they need an appointment-based system, and they need a location which is safe and offers them what they legitimately expect in terms of working conditions. So what the board has done is consolidate to 4 services in order to ensure that they can deliver that under our direction, and then expand from 4 out to 7, out to 9 again, in order to make sure we have a robust, sustainable service. Out-of-hours is critical to our primary care, and that is critical to integration. So I couldn't agree more, but that is the basis of this, and that is why we are taking the action we're taking.
Thank you. I apologise to Fulton McGregor for failing to reach his question. That concludes portfolio questions. We'll have a short pause before we move on to the next item of business.